We've been considering the subject of temptation. If you want to open a Bible, if you brought one with you, or you're welcome to use it on a device, I'll show you passages on the screen this morning as well. We're going to start in the book of 1 John. If you're not very familiar with the Bible or comfortable navigating it, the table of contents is your friend, and in this case, you can start at the back and just work your way in. It's right towards the back, 3 small letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. We've been considering the subject of temptation. Our normal practice is that we just work through portions of the Bible. So we've been going through the Gospel of Luke, and we came to chapter 4, considering the temptations of Jesus, recognizing that Jesus as God in flesh, as God, he is tempted in particular ways that you're never going to be tempted. The evil one himself is not going to lift you up and show you all the kingdoms of the world and promise you all their authority and power. That's never going to happen to you. And yet you will be tempted in the substance of the temptation that Jesus as a man learned obedience through what he suffered. You are going to be tempted to want all of the future glory and peace and splendor of Christ's kingdom in the future. You're going to be tempted to want that when now God calls us to lay down our life. We're tempted to avoid the cross. So Jesus is tempted in ways that we're not, and he's tempted in ways that we often are. And then we are going to spend 3 weeks, we started last week, considering the historic sources of temptation, the world, the flesh, and the devil. Temptation we've been considering as deceitful promises that something or someone other than God is most satisfying. And we're spending time considering these things that we would grow to recognize in ourselves our vulnerability to temptation so that we might learn, like Jesus demonstrated, like his Spirit empowers us to do, how not to give in to temptation, but instead to live lives marked by obedience and holiness that God makes possible for us. So the world, the flesh, and the devil. 2 places in the Bible, I want to show you these, where these show up together, and yet not in the same order. And then I want to show you why I think this phrase has become really common in English. Why my guess is most Americans, even those that don't go to church, my guess is a majority of people have a category, at least for the phrase, the world, the flesh, and the devil, and know it's not a good thing. Let me show you these 2 places in Scripture, and then this morning we're going to spend most of our time considering the flesh. Okay, the first is from 1 John. This is the Word of God. I write to you, young men, because you are strong, and the Word of God abides in you, and you have overcome the evil one. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So the devil, the world, the flesh. Now Paul, in the book of Ephesians, gives the order a little bit differently. He says, you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. So the world, the devil, the flesh. Why is it now that we always conceive of it as the world, the flesh, and the devil in that order? Maybe you were anticipating there's a verse in the Bible that just lists them right like that. Here's why I think this is so common and as a way to just help broaden our understanding of church history. Last week we considered the example of Benedict Arnold. So around the formation of our own country in the late 1700s, if you lived in England at the time, 90 to 95%, according to the historian Mark Knoll, 90 to 95% of people in England went to church every single Sunday. Think about that. 90 to 95% of the population went to church every single Sunday. And if you're English, that means you're a Christian, which meant you went to the Church of England. That's just how it worked. 90 to 95% of people did. Now, Audience participation. You're going to either raise your hand if you think the church services were on average longer than 2 hours or less than 2 hours. I would encourage you to consider longer as the option. But here's the test. Raise your hand if you think the church services were on average longer than 2 hours. I'm trying to help you here. I am your friend. The average church service, 2 to 3 hours long. That church service was ordered by the Book of Common Prayer. One of the sections of the service, now again, this is 90 to 95% of people in England, every Sunday for 2 to 3 hours. One part of the service was called the litany, where the officiant of the service would read the same words every single Sunday, and the congregation would respond with the same words every single Sunday. This went on largely uninterrupted for anywhere between 100 to 200 years. Okay, here are some of the phrases. You'll recognize the one we're talking about this morning. So, I'll be the officiant, you be the participants. If you want, you can respond with the words in yellow. This is what they did. These are the exact words that were used. From all evil and mischief, from sin, from the crafts and assaults of the devil, from thy wrath, and from everlasting damnation. I mean, when you say it like that, you really want to be like, yes, good Lord, deliver us. It goes on. This stuff is rich. From all blindness of heart, from pride, vainglory, and hypocrisy, from envy, hatred, and malice, and all uncharitableness.
Good Lord, deliver us.
From fornication and all other deadly sin, and from all the deceits of the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Good Lord, deliver us.
So this is why I think, even to this day, it's very common in English to recognize the world, the flesh, and the devil. These are the historic sources of temptation. And we considered last week these are distinct, but they're interdependent. We used Benedict Arnold as a life story to show how these dynamics are interconnected. The world, by way of review, think external to you. The world is the fallen system of mankind in rebellion against God, seeking to put God anywhere in your life but the center. Perfectly religious, moral people can be captivated by the lies of the world, where God is not on the throne in the center of your life. He's just a part of your life. Okay, the world, external systems of fallen mankind. The flesh, that's our internal disordered desires. Our internal disordered desires that ultimately want to see ourselves placed on the throne in the center of our lives. And the devil, that's the personal spiritual being that tries to connect the allure of the world with your particular disordered desires. Because remember, we don't all have the exact same expression of disordered desires. We'll consider this morning. And we're not all drawn to the same things in the world. I have never seen a vehicle that made me crave its possession. I have never considered an amount of wealth that made me want to become a thief and a liar simply to have it. We're appealed to different things in the world. I've never been tempted to build the world's largest business empire, right? The allure of the world, what makes it attractive? What is it about riches that makes some people drawn to it? What is it about power that makes some people drawn to it? Our particular disordered desires. So these are distinct, but they're interdependent. So the evil one is trying to connect what you find in the world that is alluring, that often is alluring to you because of your particular disordered desires. All right? So this morning we're going to consider the flesh, the world, the flesh, and the devil. We're going to use a simple outline this morning. First, we're going to consider the desires of our flesh. How is it that we tend to want different parts of the allure of the world? That's the desires of the flesh. Then we'll consider, why does it even matter? What are the dangers of giving into the impulse of the flesh? Desires, danger, and then ultimately, what do we do about it? That would be victory over the flesh. Desires, danger, victory. First, desires. Back to 1 John. For all that is in the world, all that is in the external container of fallen mankind, now the flesh, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. If you grew up in a church that used the King James Version of the Bible, or perhaps you still use that translation, it's the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Let's look at each of these three phrases. The desires of the flesh. This is sensual. Now, in English, that's come to mean just sexual, but that's not how the Bible uses the word sensual. Just think of your senses. This is our disordered, fallen desires that want to find ultimate satisfaction in the things that we sense in our physical bodies. So the desire for food, for sex, for comfort, for physical strength, for thrill, a rush of adrenaline, a shot of dopamine, the avoidance of pain. Not just sexual, sensual. Galatians says the works of the flesh are evident. Sexual immorality, that's one of them. Impurity, sensuality. The heightened desire, the overly heightened desire to believe that I will be happy when. I will be satisfied when. My life will be most meaningful when. Particular impulses of our bodies, of our physical bodies are met. So, how does this play out in life? Because aren't these desires good desires? Like, why do we desire food? Why do we want to eat satisfying and appealing food? Why do we desire to be satisfied by drink? God made us that way. Why do we desire to experience sexual satisfaction? God made us that way. Why do we desire to avoid pain? Because it hurts. Are we not made one day? The Bible itself says one day there will be no more weeping, mourning, or crying, or pain. Okay, so your desire to have a pain-free existence, that is not just your own creation. You're actually made for a pain-free existence someday. Well, then how are these regarded as temptations? How is this a problem? Most of the time, when the Bible speaks of desires, passions, or appetites of the flesh, these are disordered desires. These are good desires that become ultimate demands. My good desire to eat good food and to be willing at a restaurant or in my home to buy good materials for my wife to make good food, that's wonderful and a gift of God. When that good desire becomes an ultimate demand, I will not be satisfied unless, I will not be content unless I need more in order to be happy. Then a good desire becomes a disordered desire. Don't we see this happen all the time with alcohol, with food? Can become drunkenness, can become gluttony, can become, sexual desire is very easy for it to run out of its bounds. You take a good desire that God gave and you want to express that desire in all kinds of ways outside of a marriage of one man and one woman. Right? So can you recognize some of your own vulnerabilities, some of the desires of your own flesh that is just prone to make a good desire an ultimate demand? That's the desires of the flesh, things of our senses. The next phrase, the desires of the eyes. What is this getting at? This taps into the aesthetic, the material side of our flesh that says, I see, therefore I want, I must have. If I just had that house, that car, those clothes, that husband, then I would be happy, satisfied, content. Again, good desires that become ultimate demands. This one I find easy to connect to our lives as we consider the specificity of the phrase, the desires of the eyes. What are the things that you see with your eyes in which you see beauty, in which you see things that you desire? Some of you love horses, and you see a horse and you are moved. I don't mean this in a mocking way at all. You are moved in a profoundly powerful way by the beauty, the elegance, the power, the lines, the size. Other people, not at all. Some people see a vehicle. I see stamped metal with spray paint and rubber circles meant to get you from point A to point B. Other people see works of engineering and art that are worthy of great time, great expense. What are the things that you see with your eyes that are beautiful? Okay, are some things coming to your mind? Maybe some of you are thinking the mountains, the ocean. Let's recognize a couple of things. That when we see things as beautiful, what does the fallen flesh want to do? Possess it. Does that resonate? Is that true? We see things that are beautiful. We want to possess them. Many a jealous men have tried to possess a woman captivated by her beauty. Many a person longs for the beauty of power and influence and wants to possess that power and influence. We have a tendency to want to possess that which we see as beautiful. I think this is why we're invited to see Jesus as supremely beautiful. That's why Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven, he is like a treasure hidden in the field. You're a fool if you don't find the treasure and then sell everything you have to possess the treasure. So there is something about what we find beautiful that we, by God's design, we want to possess it. But isn't it also true that we often then find as supremely beautiful lesser things? What if what we find as beautiful is meant to serve as a window? Think about this. Like, I wouldn't say to you the things in the world that you look at and see as beautiful. I would actually encourage you to be curious about why is that? Why do I think money? Why do I find that so alluring and appealing? Or status, or influence, or comfort, or ease, whatever it is that you see in the world, why do you find it as so beautiful and desirous? That's a really good question. And then of all the lesser things, or even the greater things, I mean, let's move up the ladder. Like, okay, the ocean, the mountains, sacrifice. I mean, sometimes I have seen such beauty in a well-told underdog story. I mean, I have teared up at cartoon movies that are showing portrayals of an underdog overcoming, or a child receiving the affection of a parent. Like beautiful things that move me in a power. What if those are all windows through which we are meant to see the supreme beauty of God? We have a tendency, instead, I think, to trade the creator and the giver of those gifts for the gifts themselves, believing that if we just possess these lesser things that we find beautiful, then we will be satisfied, then we will have joy. That's the desires of the eyes, often leading us to jealousy, to coveting. Third phrase, the pride of life. This is all within the desires of the flesh. What is the pride of life? I think this is the ego portion, or an ego perspective on our flesh. A pride that we take in our resources, our status, our achievements, our accomplishments. You recognize a pattern in here. Our, mine. I don't need to depend on God because I have mine. The pride of life, the Greek word is significant. It's just biology. The things that I have acquired, what I have done, and the pride that we tend to take in it, in our fallen flesh. We see the same pattern, not coincidentally, in Adam and Eve. Look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 on the screen behind me. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, they're surrounded. They've been given everything they need for food. It's not like this tree is the only source of calories in the garden. They're surrounded by incredible food. But in their flesh, now Adam and Eve don't even have a sin nature at this point. They just have bodies. They have a flesh that has physical desires. When she saw that it was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes. It was beautiful. And she saw it as such, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. We won't need God to make us wise. We will know good and evil apart from him. She took of its fruit and ate, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he also ate. The desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the pride of life. How much more vulnerable are we who have a fallen sin nature? So point 2, this gets to the question of why does it matter? Why is giving into the impulses of our flesh so dangerous? What's the significance? To the book of James we'll now go. James, the half-brother of Jesus, wrote this: "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted." Let's pause there. Trial, test, tempted. Do you remember from several weeks ago, if you were here, this is the same Greek word. Every trial may become a temptation. Every temptation is certainly a trial or a test. The difference is in what is desired to be accomplished within it. So that no one should say, verse 13, no one should say when he is tempted, God is doing this to me. I am being tempted by God. No, God can't be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Well, wait a minute then. God is sovereign over all things. So God permits me to be tested and tried, but he doesn't permit me to be tempted? But you said they're like the same thing. It's about the desired effect. A trial or a test which you will face, God does in fact try and test your faith to deepen your faith, to prove his worthiness to you, to grow your faith, to show you his mercy, to help you, to train you. What God doesn't do is try to rob you of life by tricking you, tripping you up, getting you to sin. That's temptation. God does not do that. So when you're feeling tempted, you shouldn't say, God is doing this to me. How could I even resist? He's God. God is doing this to me. No, we should not say that, because God does not tempt anyone, nor does he tempt anyone, nor is he tempted. But, verse 14, each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire, his own disordered desire. And then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So God does not tempt us. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians, this is a wonderful truth to memorize, that when you are tempted, no temptation has seized you. This is how I learned it in the NIV years and years ago. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. And when you're tempted, God will provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. What a powerful truth to tell yourself when you are feeling lured into an enticement of the world, to recognize it's your own disordered desire doing it to you. And you move closer and closer to that. You can't blame God. You should recognize my own disorder. I'm doing this to myself, and God will provide a way out. We are not bugs being mesmerized into the zapper as though we have no power over that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You don't have to give in to temptation. It's your own disordered desire. Don't blame it on God. God will provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Well, so what's the significance? Why is this so dangerous? Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. We hosted a wild game dinner last night, a very creative way for ministry and for mission. Many of you volunteered at the meal. Many of you invited friends who may not regularly gather with the church to hear the gospel presented in a way and in a medium of what they enjoy, hunting and the outdoors. That's where this image comes from, lured and enticed. This is the language of fishing and hunting. How many fish, those of you who are fishermen, how many times are you just trying to lure that little fish out from its great shelter with what? A hook and maybe a worm. Sometimes fish are so hungry you catch a fish, but it's not really big enough. You take it off the hook, you put it back. That same stinking fish comes back for the same stinking worm. This is the image of it. It's our disordered desires. Why are you prone to long after other things in the world? Why is one person tempted and another person not? By our own disordered desires. It is our own disordered desires. They lure us. They entice us. That's why human beings so regularly fall into temptation. Because our own disordered desires, like a fishing lure, like a trap, ultimately are a matter of life and death. Back to James chapter 1. Look, the paragraph ends with, he will receive the crown of life. The one who remains steadfast under trial. When you've stood the test. This isn't just speaking of every little temptation. This is the grand temptation in life, to see anyone or anything as more worthy of your life than God. The one who has endured that trial, the one who has stood firm in that test, that one will receive the crown of life. It's juxtaposed at the very end. Sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. In 1 John, the flesh swells up as the pride of life, and yet what God gives is the crown of life. The Greek word is significant. Here in James, the Greek word for life is Zoe. The substance of life, the life of life, the fullness of life, the richness of life. Not just the biological breath in your lungs, but that which makes life worth living is received as a crown from God. So then, what do we do? If we're all vulnerable in our flesh, if the consequences are a matter of life and death, well then what do we do? We'll turn to the book of Ephesians. God says, "Now this I say and testify in the Lord," this is through the Apostle Paul, "that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds." Now watch a pattern here. In the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to their hardness of heart. They've become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. Do you recognize the pattern here? First, you begin to be darkened in your mind. You begin to put in your mind things of the world. You begin to be conformed to the pattern of this world, as we saw last week in the book of Romans. And your thinking begins to change. What you see as supremely valuable begins to change. And as you see other things as more valuable than God, well then the quality of your thinking gets less unless in the futility of your mind, you can become darkened in your understanding, you become alienated, move away from the life of God because of your ignorance that is likened to a hardness of heart. They become callous. All right, think of how we experience calluses. If you're a guitar player, you get them on the tips of your fingers, and that's like a wonderful, necessary thing. If you work with your hands, you get calluses at the base of your fingers, and you're like, well, that's a good thing. But when we talk about a calloused heart, a calloused mind, when a person has become calloused, what are we saying? They can no longer feel what they're designed to feel, or they can no longer feel as well as they used to feel without the calluses. Right? Isn't this why when you're playing guitar, you want the callus because you don't want to feel the strings jab into your fingers so painfully? But when we become those who have a calloused heart, well then, as we give in to the impulses of our flesh, see if you've experienced this. You take steps to appease your own fleshly disordered desires. You take a good desire, you make an ultimate demand, and you begin to try to satisfy it. What happens to you? Your heart begins to become calloused. I mean, think of how readily this happens with alcohol, with food. Those are just easy ones. Happens with cigarettes. Happens with marijuana. Happens with all of the impulses of our flesh. You end up chasing. This happens with sexual immorality. Happens with pornography. You take a little step to gratify the desire, your disordered desire of your flesh, and then next you need to take a further step. You need a little bit more to be satisfied. You need a little bit more to be excited by it. This is just the nature of how, by our own practical experience, we recognize life works. Well, this is true because God has designed the world to work this way. If you allow your mind to become darkened, well then, your thinking becomes poor. You become callous in your conscience towards God, ending up just giving yourselves over to the impulses of your body. Remember, sensuality is not just sexual. It's just the impulses, the desires of the body. Okay, so what are we supposed to do about that? That is not the way, he says, that you learned Christ. Assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him, as the truth is in Jesus. To put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through what? Deceitful desires. This is the impulses of the flesh. And to be renewed by the spirit of your minds and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Put off and to put on. If you were with us on Ash Wednesday, we use the same idea in a season of Lent. We're about halfway through the season of Lent. Lent is from Ash Wednesday to Resurrection Sunday, where Christians have historically taken this time to recognize our vulnerability to the impulses of our flesh, and then to put off habits that deaden our hearts towards God and take on new habits that awaken our hearts towards God. Let me try to connect again the idea of what we find as beautiful to then what we are willing to do in service of what we find as most beautiful. Okay. The idea is pretty straightforward, that there are disordered desires of our flesh that on paper we would recognize, especially if you're a follower of Christ. You would answer the question correctly. Sin is bad. Sin, destructive. Sin robs life. Sin leads to death. Yep. Sin, don't do it. Okay, are we clear that we should not sin and we should not disobey? Are we clear? Okay. Why do we keep doing it then? Because we don't have a knowledge problem. The greatest problem is not a knowledge problem. The greater problem is that we don't see God as beautiful and desirable as he is. We see other things as more beautiful and more desirable. And those are the things that we pursue. So what do we do about that? Are we supposed to be like fish that see worms on hooks and are like, nope, do not do it. No, 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 no. Like, do we just willpower our way into it? I mean, you should use your willpower for sure, but is willpower enough going to keep you from sinning? I have not found that to be terribly effective in the long term. Well, so then what do? You need to trade your lesser desire for a greater desire. You need to allow God, through His Word, through a consideration of Him who is supremely beautiful, to change what you regard as desirable. All right, let me illustrate this in this way. Simeon, our youngest son, didn't like to read. Hillary and I, like good parents, are making him read anyway. 20 minutes a night with the support of the school district. Hey, your only homework tonight is to read 20 minutes a night. Get your book, read. I mean, all the things, not just, but we're good parents, so we're doubling down, read. Now, how effective do you think this was in instilling a love of reading? Not effective at all. Did we let up on the gas? No, because we're good parents, doggone it. And you got to learn how to read and like it. So get in your book. So for 11 years of his life, we're willpowering our way. And I don't regret that for a second. You got to show up in life. Bring your willpower. Get after it. I stand by what we did. He didn't like it. He should have. We were doing the right thing as parents. But then his lesser desire, reading is terrible, it's boring, I don't understand, I'm not good at it, got instantaneously replaced by a greater desire. And everything changed immediately. The greater desire's name, Harry Potter. Now all of a sudden, Simeon wants to read. And a greater desire now was accomplishing what 11 years of willpower was not alone sufficient to accomplish. What if, in your eyes, Jesus became supremely desirable? What if more desirable than the temporal satisfaction of your flesh, more desirable than comfort, more desirable than fame, more desire than temporal riches, was to actually see God as worthy? That is a game changer. Okay, well then just show me the book. Introduce me to Harry Potter. What is the Jesus equivalent of Harry Potter? Because I want to be changed. That sounds wonderful. It starts with your mind. Are you willing to put off and put on? These are the practical steps that we avail ourselves, open ourselves, present ourselves to the power of God for Him to show us that He is worthy and beautiful. Because by God's design, you move towards what you find most desirable. If this is a new idea to you, I would encourage you even to just start by asking God to help you see Him as supremely desirable. And then start reading about Christ in the Gospels. And let God show you that He is worth more, that He is more satisfying than the temporary fulfillment of the desires of our flesh.